Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. I Just Need Access to the Warehouse by Spider Dad P. When I was in high school, this town was nothing more than dirt and rocks. The medical offices were the only game in town. Nowadays, it's the birthplace and graveyard of warehouses, where tumbleweeds once rode the wind freely. Now they get caught in chain-link fences. I hate what they did to my home. Funny, all of a sudden, I'm calling it home? I'm lying to myself. I live on an abandoned military base, cursed by more than nuclear fallout. If I want midnight snacks, I'm going to have to try to get a legit place. No more squatting. That's what I'm thinking as I step into a giant warehouse. The gig itself is legit. I need access, so I called the temp agencies they work with, got my forklift certification, and boom, I had a reason to be here. My real job? Reporting back to an OSHA agent about any violations. That's where my real skills kick in, watching which rules the company pretends to enforce and which ones they ignore. Years of breaking into offices and snappy pictures of financial docs gave me a good idea of how these places run. It's a simple job, basically above the board, and more importantly, no demons involved. I'm helping people, at least that's the lie I tell myself. I don't really care about everyone's safety. They're adults, they know right from wrong. They also know that crossing the line gets you a pink slip, something I don't have to worry about. If I get caught, I just play dumb. The warehouse I'm in is in my hometown. It's a small upstart operation supplying local shops with dry goods. The problem? The shops are getting moldy products. The shelf life on this stuff is supposed to be at least 3 years. I just need proof of mold, evidence of it being documented, and proof it's being ignored. This is gonna be fun. Like any other warehouse job, I go check out the forklift I'll be operating. I pretend to go over the safety checklists. Really, I'm watching everyone else, all of them getting on faulty equipment. I can tell the problems with each one just by how the driver starts it. When everyone's gone, I actually look at my checklist and see the last time anyone filled in the form was 2 years ago. I inspect my lift and head to the dry goods section of the warehouse. The production floor is pretty boring. Everyone seems to be following health measures, wearing their hairnets, gloves, masks, the whole deal. I pretend to start pulling down a pallet of rice. Shelf life is 2 years. I check a few more pallets and confirm they're all good. I head to the spice and herb section next. On the way, I notice a pallet of candles in the disposition area. Some of them are broken, shattered, or cracked. A few are burnt. They are totally not suspicious or anything. I'll have to swing back and look into that. As soon as I turn down the aisles with the spices, I see loose leaves and powders everywhere. Not only that, there is rat droppings. I take out my phone and snap a couple shots. I head deeper into the aisles and notice the numbers are wrong. 1 or 2 boxes are missing, easy to miss if you didn't have access to the inventory records. I double-checked and noticed the sage and cloves were off by 2 boxes each. On further inspection, someone's drawn something on the remaining boxes, a circle made out of lines. I snapped a few photos of the boxes and the paperwork showing the numbers don't add up. At the other end of the aisle are canned goods. I make my way down and my nostrils get assaulted with the worst scent I've ever smelled. There are canned vegetables burst open, turning gray, shining from a film of slime. It takes everything I have not to throw up. I take pictures quickly and leave. When I think I'm safely away, I inhale deep breaths of air. Fuck this place. That was disgusting. Time to get some fresh air. I'm on the roof of the building. The breeze is nice. The desert always looks different from above. That's one of the cool things about this town, and that's the hill. The perspective is priceless. Focus on the mission, though. I can't get into the office through the doors. Those need keycards. Instead, I'll use the roof access. There are 2 entry points, one above the warehouse and the one that leads to the server rooms. The server room needs to be cooled at all times, so logically they made sure HVAC has access to the roof as well. That access is only secured by a deadbolt. Easy enough. I'll make short work of that and walk right into the office, grab the HR files, and game over. If companies knew how easy it is to break into secure files, they never trust temp agencies. I should really be thanking my mother. As I pick the lock on the deadbolt, my mind wanders to when I was younger. My mom used to think people were coming into our house at night. So, naturally, when you think someone is breaking in, you set booby traps. At least, that's what came naturally to my mother. I used to help her set up those traps. Little did I know, I was absorbing information. Weak spots in security. How someone can sneak in through a window, pick the lock to the front door. How to set up distractions from the real trap. My mother unknowingly taught me both sides. Hard not to laugh at those skills are finally coming in handy. I walk slowly, scanning the entire area for anything that looks like complaint files, a folder, a stack of papers, something. I walked over to the desk with a green folder labeled Disposition. I shrugged and opened it. I flipped through the papers and see spontaneous mold and snagged their report. Right behind it is a report on used candles. I take that one too. As I slip the reports into my clipboard, the light comes on. I freeze and set the green folder down. I slowly move towards the back of the office. I hear a voice over a walkie-talkie. I bump a desk with my knee and knock over a phone. "Who's there?" a voice calls out from the other room. I step into view, hands at wrist level. I got lost looking for the bathroom. The security officer looks at me hard. "How'd you end up in here?" he says, tone thick with suspicion. "There was an open door and I just walked in. It's my first day. I don't want to get in trouble. I need this job. My mom just died and I need to pay rent next week and still pay for her burial." That just flowed right out. The security guard nods towards the exit. "Be careful what doors you open around here. Some are better left closed." I head out, clipboard in hand. Back on the forklift, I'm reading the report on the mold. Says the products leave the warehouse perfectly fine. Every single shipment even went through an audit, an added step for quality control before it gets sent to the store. Photos of the shipments are included too. Odd, there are markings on the outgoing shipments similar to the ones on the sage and cloves. Similar, but not the same. I compared the photo in the report to the one I took earlier. When you overlap them, they create a weak hex on the food. This is just weird. I told that bastard not to give me anything magic related. Hard to believe this was accidental. Or is it something worse? No real magic, and I'm seeing connections that aren't there, like my mom. No. Shake the thought. Focus. Think. The candles. There are candles in the photos too. I checked the other disposition report. Looks like they've been finding these satanic candles, you know, the kind that disguise themselves as Catholic bullshit with burnt wicks. The candles start showing up a week before the mold. I remember a cult a few years back that tried to start a biological warfare on the upper class in Victorville. Failed quick. They left pig carcasses all over town trying to spread swine flu. It's thought it came from pigs. Looks like I'm taking a box of clothes and candles on my way out. Send them out for testing. I bet there's no real witchcraft going on. The wax in the candles must be activating mold growth on the boxes, and the circles are just marking the target product. I did my job, gathered the evidence they need, showed they know what's going on under their nose. I get a nice payout, don't ask any questions, and I can finally ditch the Air Force Base. "Are you a lizard then?" my coworker asked after commenting on my yellow eyes, and I just laughed and said it was a rare genetic defect. Late that night, I snuck into his house, unhinged my jaw, and ate his youngest child. Because I just think he was kinda rude, you know? The government keeps saying out weird alerts. By Strawberry Rose. Text conversation. "Hey, bro, did you get that message from the government?" Sent at 5:49 p.m. "Yeah, I did. I don't know what they're talking about, to be honest." Sent at 5:49 p.m. "It's kinda creeped me out. I mean, we're both on our phones right now, and nothing's happened." Sent at 5:49 p.m. "Yeah, I guess, but they said just wait, so that's all we can do." Sent at 5:49 p.m. "Yeah, I guess. Maybe it's just a prank, lol. If it is, we'll know eventually." Sent at 5:50 p.m. "Right, yeah." Sent at 5:50 p.m. End of text conversation. I sighed and put my phone down, feeling a little odd. A little over 15 minutes ago, I received an automatic alert sent out by the US government. It felt official, and a quick Google search showed that people all over the US had received the exact same alert. In its exact words, the alert read, "This is an official US government alert. We've been experiencing problems with phone usage of times over 30 minutes. Please refrain from interacting with your cellular device more than 30 minutes at a time until you receive another alert with further instructions. Failure to comply with this essential rule will not be compensated by the US government. May God be with us all." I had been scrolling on r/rule horror, one of my favorite subreddits, when I got the alert. Thinking back to it now, it's fairly laughable how similar the alert was to one of the stories I had finished reading. 15 minutes ago, I didn't think much of it, but now the eeriness and sudden silence of usually bustling city life was creeping me out. So I decided to message one of my online friends on Discord. Discord conversation. That one gamer, 5:56 p.m. "Yo bro, you got that message from the government?" Odd Cheeseballs, 5:56 p.m. "Yeah, I got it. You don't actually think it's real, do you?" That gamer, 5:56 p.m. "Seems kinda legit, don't you think?" Odd Cheeseballs, 5:56 p.m. "Meh, I don't really care. Wanna play some COD?" That one gamer, 5:57 p.m. "Computer or phone?" Odd Cheeseballs, 5:57 p.m. "PS5, you dumbass." That one gamer, 5:57 p.m. "Mine's charging right now. I don't think I can." Odd Cheeseballs, 5:57 p.m. "Fine, I'll just find someone else then. Good night." That one gamer, 5:58 p.m. "Good night, lol. See you tomorrow morning." End of Discord conversation. Daniel doesn't reply back after that message, so I set my phone down again. I hadn't been on my phone that much at all today, so I have around, only 5 minutes or so until I hit that 30-minute usage limit. Oh well, I was never a phone fanatic anyway. I much prefer music and books. Speaking of music, my roommate is being awfully quiet right now. I decided to go check on him, staying up and making my way down to our communal living room, expecting to see him lounging. He's not there. Maybe he's in his room? Wait, why do I even care? It's not like we're friends. I roll my eyes and go back up the stairs to my room, settling down on my bed with my laptop. Laptops don't count as phones or cellular devices, do they? Why am I taking this so seriously? I'm not a rule follower by any means. Perfect timing, because literally 10 seconds after I open my computer and Google the strange alert again, my phone pings. I opened it and checked. It's the promised second alert. This is an official US government alert. If you're still reading this, congratulations. You've complied with our first alert well enough. We now have a set of instructions for you all to follow. Given that phone time is dangerous, there have been an email sent to all email addresses of US origins that have shown activity within the last 6 months. Be aware your email may arrive now or later, depending on how fast you manage to send them out. Thank you, and may God be with us all. I turned my phone off as soon as I finished reading, setting it on my nightstand. I turned back to my laptop and opened Gmail as fast as I can. And there in the top of my inbox it is. This is an email from the official US government. Failure to comply with the following rules will not be compensated by the US government. 1. Do not, under any circumstance, use any electronic devices for more than 20 minutes at a time. If you do spend up your time limit, do not use any electronic device again for 12 hours. 2. Listening to music is now 100% prohibited if it is from the internet or an electronic device. 3. Accessing social media sites is still illegal, but we are still assessing if they contain the virus or not. 4. The alerts will now begin to be mailed out individually. Wait patiently for the letter containing more rules to arrive to you, and barricade yourself into your place of residence in the meantime. 5. If you live with any elderly person over the age of 65, any children under the age of 8, or any person with physical disabilities that impair their sight, hearing, or ability to move, make sure they are with you at all times and do not lose sight of them. 6. You should definitely go on the internet. It's a wonderful source of information and experience. 7. Do not, under any circumstances. 8. Don't. 9. Everything is going to be alright. Just use your phone and act normal. 10. No, not now. Please, not now. Thank you for complying with the rules. This is for your safety and for the greater good. May God be with us all. I stared, confused at the last 3 rules. Is that a prank? God, I feel stupid. This was all just a huge prank. I sighed and go to my phone, breathing a sigh of relief before I freeze again. There's yet another alert. How many of these do they need to send out? And was this even a prank? Why can't the government just be clear about something for once? I read the alert quickly, eyes circling past the bold, bright red letters. This is an official US government alert. There has been a miscommunication and breach of the virus. Don't worry, it will be promptly contained. In the meanwhile, distance yourself from all electronic devices with a screen. May God be with us all. I gulp. Our apartment has a Samsung fridge with a touchscreen. Does that count? Speaking of R, where's Ryan? I considered shooting him a text, but remembered the alert. I really should just go up to his room. I stand up, wearily eyeing my open laptop as I shut it quickly. Another ping from my phone. Do they even care about all the time we have to spend reading it? I sighed and begrudgingly opened the text. This is an... oh God, there's no point anymore. It broke out. It's in everything that runs off electricity now. Save yourself. Pray even if you're an atheist. It's spreading. God isn't with us anymore. I gulp harder this time. I don't know when, but I've started sweating despite it being December. The room feels cold, but I feel hot. I put my phone down and stand up, deciding to go find Ryan. But it's not letting me go. I want to pick up my phone. I need to pick it up. I wipe the sheen of sweat off my forehead. I've never been a forehead sweater. When did that start? An attempt to ignore the sensation. I'm dizzy. Did I go past the 30-minute limit? What did I do? I stumbled around, head aching, nauseous. It's not letting me go. It's not letting me go. Not letting me go. It's relentless. I can do nothing but serve my true purpose. I grab my phone and start doom scrolling on TikTok, not even absorbing the information and pictures. My body won't move, even though my brain is screaming at it to stop. I can still think, but I can't move. I don't think I went past the 30-minute limit, did I? There's fish, there's art, there's a meaningless story copied from Reddit, playing word by word with someone playing a Minecraft parkour in the background. There's cooking, there's fashion, there's everything. Everything and everywhere, all at once. All the sensations blur together as I exit TikTok and enter Instagram. I don't even have an Instagram account. I scroll on Insta Reels, mindlessly staring. I can't avert my gaze. When was the last time I blinked? My eyes feel dry. I feel really nauseous now. What time is it? 10 p.m. already? What? I don't even care about time anyway. I'm just here to serve my true purpose, as everyone should too. As my husband and I descended through the elevator of our apartment building, I just wish I could break down and yell at him about how his separation just gave me the most horrible and stressful night of my life. Though I doubt he could hear me from the 3 suitcases I'm taking with me to the woods. The Puppeteer by Kyle Bigham. Sarah Mitchell had always considered her husband, Agent David Mitchell, to be a man of order, intellect, and reason. His world was one of clear-cut facts, analyzed evidence, and unshakable logic. There was a comfort in that, in the way he could always separate emotion from investigation, shield them from the chaos his work often entailed. So, when she discovered an unmarked file tucked away in his office drawer one evening, a file he had never mentioned, she was intrigued. The file's surface was worn, the manila edges frayed as though it had passed through countless hands before finding its way to her. The label, in faded black ink, read, Re-101-The Puppeteer. It was a title that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. though she could not yet explain why. Curiosity tugged at her like a child pulling on a sleeve, and Sarah, usually cautious, couldn't resist. She opened the folder. At first glance, it looked like just any other case file. Testimonies, photographs, surveillance reports, nothing she hadn't seen David shift through countless times before. Yet something was different. A palpable heaviness filled the air as her eyes began scanning the contents. The first document was a brief report on a nameless victim, the identification redacted. What struck Sarah immediately was the way the incident was described. The victim had discovered an old photograph in a forgotten trunk in the attic of their childhood home. In the faded sepia image, a man stood with a puppet dangling from strings in his hand. But the puppet was not what had disturbed them. It was the man. His face was smudged, indistinct blur, as though someone had intentionally obscured it from view. It was the kind of blur that didn't make sense in an old photograph. The face wasn't out of focus, it was deliberately hidden, as if a dark cloud of ink had seeped into the paper itself, making the figure seem both part of the image and not. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she continued reading. What had begun as a simple discovery quickly descended into a walking nightmare. The nameless victim had reported that the photograph seemed to change every time they looked at it. At first, it was subtle, just a shift in the light or the puppet's angle. But soon, the puppet appeared to move on its own, its position different each time they returned to the image. Then came the hallucinations. Dark, distorted figures seen in every corner of their vision, voices in the dead of night, whispers they couldn't quite decipher. And the dreams of strings attaching to their limbs, pulling them in unnatural, jerking movements, as though they had become a marionette in the hands of some unseen master. The report ended abruptly. No conclusion, no final notes, just a single cryptic sentence. Victim is no longer responsive. Sarah's fingers trembled as she flipped the page. Her eyes found the next entry, another victim, a young woman this time. Similar circumstances. She had found a drawing of a puppet, half torn and crumpled inside an old book she purchased at a flea market. Like the first victim, it began with strange occurrences, items in her apartment shifting positions, shadows that didn't belong to anyone, and always the puppet. Its twisted wooden limbs and painted eyes staring, unblinking. The nightmares came next. The woman had described the sensation of being controlled, her body moving against her will. She awoke with bruises around her wrists and ankles, deep purple marks that resembled the impressions of tight, pulling strings. As Sarah read, her chest tightened. This was no ordinary case. It was as though the entry, whatever it was, thrived on more than just fear. It fed on control, on the act of manipulating its victims until they were no longer their own. Each case followed the same eerie pattern. First contact was an image, whether a photograph, drawing, or even a sculpture, triggering the descent. And once the victim was touched by the puppeteer's influence, there was no escape. Sarah felt a growing unease settling in her stomach. The room had become noticeably colder. She glanced at the window. It was closed. She hadn't noticed before how still the house was. No hum of the refrigerator, no distant murmur of the TV. Nothing but the sound of her own shallow breathing. She reached the last few pages of the file. One final report caught her attention. This victim was different. Not just a random bystander, but an investigator. A seasoned agent working for a covert agency known as the APE, the Apocalypse Prevention Enterprise. The agent's testimony was more detailed than the others, filled with critical observations. They had been assigned to investigate the origins of the puppeteer case after several unexplained disappearances. The agent's notes were meticulous, charting their own mental unraveling as they dug deeper. They had obtained a photograph, much like the others, and described feeling drawn to it, as if something beyond their understanding had compelled them to stare. Soon, they too began to suffer the symptoms: hallucinations, insomnia, the feeling of being watched by something unseen. But unlike the others, they had one final observation. The entity is not bound to the image itself. It transcends it. It enters through the mind. Once you see it, once you acknowledge its existence, it knows you. Sarah's pulse raced. The words felt like a warning, meant for anyone foolish enough to read too far. Yet, she couldn't stop. Her eyes flickered down the page, hungry for more answers, for something that would explain the strange dread now gripping her. The report ended with the agent's disappearance. No trace of them was ever found. Just as Sarah was about to close the file, something slipped from between the pages, a photograph. Her heart lurched. It was a picture of the puppeteer. She stared at it, transfixed. The man stood in the shadows, holding the puppet in one hand, its limp wooden limbs hanging lifeless. But just like in the other reports, the man's face was a smudged blur. She felt the room shift, as though the very walls were pulled inwards, enclosing her in a tightening grip. The temperature plummeted further, her breath now visible in the air. Suddenly, a sensation crawled up her spine, a cold, creeping awareness that she was no longer alone. Sarah's eyes darted to the edge of the room, to the corners where the shadows seemed to gather unnaturally thick. The photograph fell from her hands, landing face up on the floor. In the silence, the ticking of the clock grew deafening, each second pounding in her ears. She bent down to pick up the photograph, but hesitated. Something was wrong. The puppet, it had moved. Its head was now turned ever so slightly, looking directly at her. Sarah's breath hitched. She jerked upwards, eyes wide, heart hammering in her chest. Her instinct was to flee, to leave the file, the photograph, the room, everything. But her legs refused to move. Her mind whirled. Had she seen it? Really seen it move? Then she remembered the warning. She glanced at the file's cover again. This time, the words in bold at the top seemed to scream to her. Do not open without official APE protective eyewear. Her stomach dropped. It was too late. She had opened it, she had seen it, and now it had seen her. The room dimmed as the shadows lengthened, closing in, and Sarah felt the unmistakable pull of invisible strings tightening around her wrist. She wasn't alone anymore. I begged the officers to reconsider, as they told me that they couldn't start searching for my husband until he was missing for 24 hours. I stand there sobbing as the doctor explains that my husband's car had fallen into a ravine and that he had been trapped in there for almost a day before succumbing to his injuries. I Think My Dead Dad Was My DD by Kyle Bigham. All alcoholics know at some point the thing you love will kill you. It's a dangerous romance, a razor-thin line between logic and lust. This is something I have struggled with, and have blamed on my own father for my entire life, because at least, that way, I had an excuse to keep doing it. If this curse was handed down to me, I'm a victim. I don't have to think about how much I enjoy destroying myself, because it was inevitable. His true love claimed him when I was 16, after he drunk drove his truck through the front of our house, blaring sirens in hot pursuit. Rather than facing another DUI, he decided to try and beat the cops back to our house. The last thoughts that went through his head were, "See, I told you I could make it back." Then windshield glass, and finally, I'd assume, the family photo that hung on the wall over the couch. Wearing a seatbelt would have saved him, but we were thankful he hadn't. We wouldn't have been able to afford his legal fees. That image, the front of his work truck lighting up my mangled father's corpse, draining into the carpet where I watched cartoons and ate cereal. It still comes to me whenever I see the red and blue of police lights at night. I have never drunk and driven, though there have been many times I have been tempted out of convenience or shame. However, this did not stop my love affair. No, it just gave it a purpose. Now my desires were justified by genetics and tragedy, and you can bet I wallowed in it. I lied, begged, and disappointed myself all the way to this point. Divorced, unemployable, and medium sober. Sitting at a run-down motel desk and asking myself if what just happened, happened. Because I just got a ride home from the bar, and my father was my DD. As I said, luck hasn't been on my side as of late. I've been living hand to mouth on the alimony my ex-wife pays me for at least a year. That is, until my cousin called me and told me he had a job lined up for me. I just needed to get there and be sober. I packed up, recycled all my empties in my Safari for gas money, and made a beeline for the coast. I was making good time, so I decided to stop for a bit at the Gilded Feather and play a few hands of blackjack. Before you judge me, I only had a beer, which was pretty impressive considering I went on the run that had me walking out with over $500 of the tribe's money. Happiness hadn't felt this crisp to me in a very long time. I was proud of myself for waving off the waitress when she came to freshen me up. This is a new start. Maybe I can finally turn this boat around. The only road to the coast was a 2-lane highway over a mountain pass. I'd been driving a Mita instead of a busted van from the 90s that sounded like a destruction derby car. I imagined it would have been a fun, scenic affair. All I could think about was what would happen to me if she dropped dead and left me walking through a country that had a mural of Bigfoot on the side of their grocery store. I had no issue pulling into a tiny town just before nightfall, and I didn't want to risk my luck turning on the other side of the mountain. Then, remembering the cash burning a hole in my pocket, I sent a text to my cousin telling him I'd be there first thing in the morning and rented a room for the night. The only place to eat was a bar about a mile outside of town. The plan was to leave at 5 a.m. and drive the last 75 miles or so to make my first day of work. I wanted to be clear-headed tomorrow morning, so I pinky promised myself that I wouldn't drink too much. The drive over to the aptly named Consumption Junction took 5 minutes. Hey, a man has to eat. It couldn't have been helped that the only restaurant had a bar. The locals were very friendly, as I imagine they don't often get new drinking buddies here. The crowd was my type, barflies that stare into the glass of whatever their favorite well liquor is, and chase it down with a beer back. Our lives have no time for mixers, and sugar will give us diabetes. Eventually, there remained 4 of us who had been bonding over shots and rock and roll bands from our past, were informed it was closing time. My billfold was filled with 50 and scribbled on pieces of napkin with phone numbers of people I would never speak to again. It was then that I began to recognize that familiar feeling of disappointment, when it became apparent that your actions and your intentions differ. I lost count of my drinks, I couldn't drive, and all my shit was back in the motel too, so I couldn't just sleep here and take off in a few hours. My well-laid plans had been fucked by mice. This, surprisingly, is where I began to question my own memories. Agonizingly, I pondered my options and decided the valiant, noble thing to do would be to walk a mile back to my room, grab my stuff, and walk back to the van. Hopefully, I will have enough time to sober up and be at work on time. My cousin had stuck his neck out for me, and I had swore I was deserving of this risk. It wasn't the worst situation I had found myself in by a long shot, nor would it be the first time I had gone to work after an all-nighter. In hindsight, I should have slept in the van and picked up my clothes on the way out of town. What can I say? I was shit-faced. People take for granted the notion of streetlights. I imagine it's not too often that modern folks find themselves outside at night in a place only lit by the moon. The pale light plays tricks on your mind. I felt this truth more and more as I drunkenly ambled down the highway at 2:30 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. I was a lonely soul, and I felt it. My right foot kept finding loose rocks, and I kept finding myself in the muddy ditch. Within a half an hour of my trek, I had made it around the first bend in the road. I could not see any lights off in the distance. The only hint of civilization was the existence of the highway that kept wandering out from under my legs. I was completely soaked by the next bend after falling face first into the stinkiest pool of water in existence. In that moment, I was thankful for the darkness, as I would rather keep the mystery of what I was swimming in alive, instead of knowing the foulness of its contents. The realization I left my phone in my van to charge hit me about an hour into my journey, a complete guess, as I'm thoroughly convinced I had walked for 3 hours at least. I remember sitting on the side of the road for a while to cry, the roller coaster of emotions becoming too much for me. My loneliness so complete, as there would be no one for me to call for help had I even thought to bring it. I remember wishing someone would drive by and take pity on me. I just needed to get to my room and take a shower. I would be a better man then. In the distance ahead of me, a light appeared, blinding in the blackness that my eyes were accustomed to. Angelic, divine, I was saved. The prayer of a drunk answered. So I yelled out in the black, yelled for salvation, signaled with earnest as this titanic survivor had glimpsed the Carpathia and would never be left behind. The high-pitched whine of an old transmission downshifting was music to my ears. A Ford Ranger from the 1970s with a caved-in front end pulled up alongside me. I was glad for the state of it, as I wouldn't have to feel so bad for my muddiness. It was dark in the cab, so my savior remained a mystery. When I turned to put on my seatbelt, it became apparent there were none. Thank you so much. I've been out there forever, I said honestly. The only reply came from the truck as it began to lurch forward slowly, the dark man shifting smoothly without using the clutch, like a truck driver from the past. My dad had a truck like this, I remember saying to him, ignored again as the man just continued to pick up speed, shifting. His Ranger didn't have seatbelts either, I said, finishing my thoughts about how useful they would have been in my head. That bar is a lot further from town than it looks. It took me 5 or so minutes to get there in my van, but I've been walking for hours. I was startled by his voice. You came from the bar? Yeah, from consumption. A little chuckle from the night's festivities regarding its origins blossoming in my brain now that the fear had gone to bed. Ugh, was the noise he made, shifting and accelerating. I began to notice the trees ripping past us now. Wasn't sure what gear we were in as the speedometer read 75. The fear was awake, and I wished to be back in my stinky puddle again. You must know these roads well, like the back of your hand, I said, trying to tactfully broach the subject of our unbelievable speed. I may have been drunk, but I'm professional, and even incapacitated, I would have realized there was no way he could be making these corners without braking. All I could do was hold on as this madman pressed harder on the gas pedal and changed gears. Hey man, this isn't cool. What the hell are you doing? He pressed on, unaffected by my obvious distress. You smell like liquor, son. Well, yeah, I was at a bar, man. Slow down. They buy you drinks? He spat into the steering wheel. Did you take liquor from them in there? The sudden change from the shadow man caused me to piss his seats. I was absolutely terrified and drunk and hurling down a 2-lane mountain road with a complete stranger. I can remember looking into his face, straining to see him, and only finding darkness. It was as if he wore a black hole as a mask. I recognized the rage. I had worked my entire life to drink away its place in my childhood. Is that what you wish for your memory? Answer me, boy. He shifted again. Look into yourself. Is there anyone left to remember you? When this truck stops, will there be anyone to make sure you're put to rest? He screamed in the cab of the truck and continued shifting, his left hand furiously moving back and forth on the wheel guiding us, though it felt like the truck was on rails. There were no longer trees flying by, as now the entirety of our surroundings had become a blur outside the truck. My hand searched for a solid place to brace, moving to his dashboard, bleeding for security. Consumption leads to rot, he bellowed. All dead things rot. I crunched something in my clasping hands and pulled it to my face, only to recognize my own countenance staring back at me. It was a faded picture of me and my family, standing outside our house, all waving and smiling for the camera. I looked at the man's face and only saw my imagination. Glory to those who know their place, that know they are burdened on those they love and look to pay that debt. Dad? This picture was real. I could feel it in my hands. Behind those waving, smiling faces is a broken home. Behind that broken family would lay a crumbling house. The overalls stained in a familiar pattern. Those hands, gnarled into clubs from work, were used to teach me better. I could smell Copenhagen and beer in the cab of the truck, body overpowered by Old Spice. I knew where I was. I knew who I was riding with. I knew where we were going, as I had visited often in my nightmares. And I began yelling, You're right, like father, like son, huh? I thought just because I never drank and drove, I was better than you. That because I never had kids and beat them, that we weren't the same. Yet, here we are. Here we are, alone and hurling drunk down the road in your truck. You win. Are you happy, Dad? Just like old times, except this time I get to be drunk too. My throat burned along with my eyes. Tears and sweat and alcohol came out of me as I unloaded everything that I hid from myself onto the man that left me behind. I screamed and I screamed and I screamed. And he facelessly shifted and swerved in anticipation and sheer hysteria. I began baying him. That spot looks good, right there. Come on, any tree will do. Just make sure it's solid. I don't want to limp away from this, Dad. I reached under the seat and I found the emergency beer I was looking for, the one that I knew from experience would be there. Look at you, Pops, still a man after my own heart. And as I cracked it, words began to flow out of the can. They began to bury into my legs. Righteous agony driven out my hysteria and replaced it with raw, unadulterated horror. Oh my God, Dad, please help me. A broken child swatting at something wicked and looking for their parents' salvation. I need you to save me. There is nothing to save. You look to fill your hollowness with vice and sin. What would be left for you? You know what you are, and drink yourself into oblivion to hide from it. I could no longer hear the engine. It was just my father's voice in the tunnel of our collective fury. We, together, hurling down the road towards our destination. One already knew the way, and the other waiting to see how to get there. After looking into the face of the monster driving my father's truck again, gazing deep into the blackness, I closed my eyes and accepted my fate. I woke up in a gully, completely soaked and disorientated, and about 15 feet off the shoulder of the highway. I had been laying there for a while, as my hands were pruning from the water, and I was dreadfully cold. It wasn't until I made it back to my motel room and stripped naked in front of the mirror did I see the true extent of my injuries, though I had felt them on the way. Black and blue covered my shoulder and chest, all decorated with thousands of little cuts, my thighs ravaged by little pin-sized holes oozing. My face got the worst, as both of my eyes were almost swollen shut, and there's a massive gash across my forehead. If I didn't know any better, I suggest I went through someone's windshield. Of course, that's ridiculous. There was no accident anywhere near where I woke up. Not that I looked very hard, admittedly. Call it a hunch. When I walk back to get my van, I won't see any wrecks being hauled off. They cleaned it up a long time ago. I watched them in my PJs doing it. The sun is coming up, and I'm going to miss my first day at work. Oh well, that bridge was very stupidly built of flammable material anyways. But I wanted to sit and type this all out before I can shower and sleep away this nightmare. It's more than likely than anything that I fell down during my journey home and tried to break my fall with my face. The hill I had to climb up to get back on the tarmac was so steep, it took a few tries, and there were plenty of rocks for me to find. These visions are so vivid, though. They feel so real. I haven't thought of the inside of his truck in so long. The beer under the seat was something my brain would have to dig deep in the files for in order to turn it against me. This is far beyond rock bottom. This is deep into the bedrock, separating our realm from hell. The black hole face looked into me and was disgusted. Real or not, it's time for change. Obviously, anyone I tell will dismiss it because of my disease, because of my reputation. I think I'll use this little shard of broken glass I found in my hair as a reminder. Thanks, Dad, for helping the only way you knew how. They finally found my daughter's body deep in the forest, curled into the fetal position, her tiny hand clutching a plastic walkie-talkie. It crackled to life in the evidence room this morning. "Daddy, I found where they keep the other kids." The House That Never Sleeps by GrimmInDarkness. Hello and welcome to another episode of Shadows and Secrets. I'm your host, Lenora Black. A female voice speaks into a desk microphone. Today, we're looking into the mysterious disappearances and murders of the Ashcroft estate. Eerie music plays in the background as she continues. The Ashcroft estate sits high in the ominous mountains of Dursted Rise, where the first murder was found in 1836. A body of an unidentified 28-year-old female was found at the bottom of the grand staircase. The design modeled after the grand staircase of the Bricking Hall. Could this have cursed it in some way? Lenora leaned on her desk, elbows propping up as she closed in on the microphone. The bodies of each victim were always found in unusual places of the estate and in odd positions, almost as if they were posing for a painting for Jacques-Louis David, the artist behind The Death of Merit. She leans back, looking up at the ceiling. "Which comes to my special announcement," she smiled. "I will be moving into the Ashcroft estate. I'm hoping to solve these murders and disappearances. I hope you will wish me good luck as I continue to update you during the process. This has been Lenore Black, your host of Shadows and Secrets, signing off." She took off her headphones and placed them down. Lenore stopped the recording and had to admit she was most definitely nervous. Who wouldn't be? After all, she was going to be living in a place where people had died or disappeared. Lenore looked at her packed-up boxes, knitting her brows in tired frustration, exhaling a sigh. It was time to call the movers. By the time Lenore was on the road, she was sure the move hive was already halfway there. Trying to obey traffic laws to get to the estate, Lenore didn't want to be pulled over. If that occurred, it put her further behind schedule. Passing the signs to the Dursted Rise Mountains, she gripped the steering wheel, knowing there was no turning back now. From here, it was a straight shot to the Ashcroft estate. Lenore was expecting a winding road that twisted around to the top. Instead, it was up various hills, one after the other, then through an open gate. When the Ashcroft estate came into view, she let out an audible gasp. The estate was breathtaking with its brick, stone veneer siding, and prairie windows. Who knew that such a beautiful place was full of so much pain and grief? Parking behind the moving van, Lenore got out. Walking up to the window, she peered in and saw no one. Where did they go? Lenore had the only key to get inside. Did they by chance leave it here in a hurry? Clicking her tongue, Lenore sighed, digging the key out of her purse. She walked towards the front door, keys in hand, and unlocked it. Pushing it open, Lenore stepped inside, feeling around. She found a light switch, flipping it on. Above her, lights flickered to life, even if they were dim. Shutting the white oak door, her heels clicked on the marble flooring as she crossed the room towards the foyer. The air felt heavy and smelled of mothballs and mildew. As she stood there, Lenore closed her eyes, taking in the atmosphere. Something about this place was off. If there was too many presences together in one place, all of them trying to find an exit, but were being kept here. Whatever it was keeping them here had to be the one behind it. at least that was one of her theories, that instead of a killer, that it was a malevolent force which murdered them. Leaving the foyer, Lenore searched for a room to stay in. She'd wait till morning and bring her belongings inside. Finding a room with an ensuite, Lenore settled in, going to sleep. During the night, she dreamed of walking through one of the many halls. It felt oddly bigger than it had when she walked inside. Or had she gotten smaller? Regardless, she kept moving forward. Looking at her hand, Lenore lifted a lantern which lit the way. She took soft, careful steps, not wanting to make a sound, fearing if Lenore did, it would waken or alert someone. Her shuddering breath showed how cold it was. Wooden floorboards creaked under her bare feet, walking on a faded floral rug runner leading down a hallway to her right. At the end where she was walking stood someone. When raising her lantern, the light shone on them. It didn't feel right. Lenore willed herself to turn back, but her legs kept moving forward. Getting closer and closer, the face became more visible to her. Before seeing it clearly, she woke up in a cold sweat, rubbing her shaky hands over her face. What she did get to see about that person was dark circles, pale, lifeless iris, and sunken cheeks. The scent of death was heavy in the air. Their heavy stare on her weighed her down. That was when she woke up. If she hadn't, would they have meant death for her? Getting out of bed, Lenore walked into the ensuite to splash water on her face. Drying her face with a towel, she looked up into the mirror, stalling backwards in surprise. Instead of her own reflection staring back at her, it was a little girl, the one who she believed to be seen through the eyes of. They stared at each other for a while, then the little girl wrote on the other side of the fogged-up glass. Lenore cautiously stepped closer, reading the message. "He will be after you soon. Let me help." Who exactly was the he she was talking about? Did she mean the cloaked figure? Lenore gulped, licking her dry lips. She knew that this would be difficult to do on her own. Lenore nodded, accepting the help which had been offered to her. The ghost of the girl then wrote another message, telling Lenore to find the study. There should be some unusual information on the person she saw. She wasn't sure how this would help, but Lenore agreed to look. The study was covered in cobwebs with thick layers of dust on the books, shelves, and desk. Walking over to the wooden desk, Lenore began looking through some documents. Glancing over them, there wasn't much to go off of until she found one incident report. On April 13th, 1840, the body of the Ashcroft Estates gardener was found face down in the fountain. This was around early morning during winter, so the water was practically frozen. He was found wearing a dark cloak with the hood up. Death was caused by blunt force trauma to the back of the head. When they removed his body, it was still warm. He hadn't been dead long as the blood also clotted, nor did it have time to drip into the water. Lenore wondered if the body had been moved there. Where had the Ashcroft's gardener been killed before being placed inside the fountain? It was like playing a game of Clue. Since there was no murder weapon found, it would be hard to figure out who did it. Why the gardener? Under the coroner's report was a file dated December 5th, 1836. Opening up, Lenore read the report. In the dead of the night, a housekeeper reported screaming and sounds of struggling from an upstairs bedroom. Around midnight, the same housekeeper found the dead body of a 28-year-old woman at the bottom of the stairs. Rope burn marks were found around her neck. The person was identified as the daughter of an Ashcroft employee. Lenore lowered the file in her hands. Could she have been related to the gardener? The door to the study creaked, causing her to look up. Nothing was there, but she felt as if someone was watching her. The presence stood there for a while before slamming the door shut, causing Lenore to jump. What was that? Not that she could normally see all spirits in the first place. This one didn't want to be seen. Part of Lenore wanted to go after while her common sense screamed no. Laying the file down next to the other report, she compared them. If he indeed was her father, he must have found out who had murdered her. In turn, that person must have silenced him. Lenore looked through the rest of the desk. She was looking for something, anything to give her a hint. Maybe information about the owner of the estate or another death that was recorded. When Lenore came across the locked drawer, she grabbed the letter opener and popped it open. Inside was a bloody paperweight and a rope. These are without a doubt the murder weapons. If she had to guess, the very first owner of Ashcroft must have been the one to kill the young woman and her father, the gardener. Then the spirits must have got back at him by taking his daughter's life, along with the rest of his family. Anyone else who owned this house or came to investigate became cursed. Thus ended their lives one after another. How could Lenore stop the gardener and his daughter from killing more people? She couldn't exactly bring the old Ashcroft owner to justice since they probably already got him. Unless the men escaped before they could. If that was the case, then she would have to gather all the evidence so she could start a posthumous trial. All she had to do was gather the murder weapons and the coroner's reports. Taking off her robe, she picked up the items in the drawer and tied it up. With a bundle in one arm, Lenore picked up the 2 files on the desk. She made her way to the study door and opened it. Looking down each end of the hallway, Lenore swiftly walked down the right side, making her way to the bedroom. She needed to call someone, but who? Lenore was not particularly close to anyone. Maybe the realtor? Digging through her purse, she found a business card for a man who sold her the house. Picking up her phone from the nightstand, she dialed the number and waited as it rang. The sound of a groggiest sigh emitted from the other end. Miss Black, do you have any idea what time it is? I apologize, Mr. White, but I don't know who else to turn to. Then what is the issue? I believe I figured out who the murderer of the Ashcroft estate is. There was a brief silence between the two. Mr. White? Stay right where you are, Miss Black, and I will be right there. The call ended and Lenore stared at her phone screen. An echoing sound of someone knocking on glass made her turn to look at the vanity. The little girl motioned to her before writing a message on the glass. Don't trust him. She made her way over to the vanity. Why shouldn't I trust him? Lenore questioned. The little girl frowned and answered, That man isn't who he appears to be. Could it be that this man was a late Ashcroft himself? Anxiety filled her mind as it raced with thoughts about what to do next. Lenore needed to get out to somewhere safe, a place that the man didn't know about. Looking at the little girl in the mirror, she asked, Do you have a favorite hiding place? The little girl's face brightened, nodding. Let me show you the way. The hiding place that the little girl had taken Lenore to is an entrance to a crawl space. Taking a shaky breath, she slipped inside, making her way through. It began as a narrow space and opened. Using her phone's flashlight, she could see cobwebs and wires. A few items littered the floor that looked like they belonged to a child. This must have been where the little girl used to come to play by herself. Walking through a bit more, Lenore could hear the front door open. Was the Mr. White here already? He should have been further away, at least an hour. "Miss Black, I'm here. Where are you?" he asked, walking into the foyer, something hidden behind his back. She peeked through the cracks in the walls and lowered her phone light. Was he here to kill her? Now Lenore knew he was the one who had killed the gardener and his daughter. He was going to silence her for good. She had to keep moving because the longer Lenore waited around, the closer he would get to finding her. As she rounded the corner, Lenore stopped dead in her tracks at what she saw before her. There, slumped in the corner of the room, a piece of its skull cracked, was a skeleton in a yellow dress. Blonde hair was still attached to the scalp. Lenore covered a hand over her mouth in shock. Had Mr. White hunted his own daughter for being a witness to the murders he committed? Like TV static, the little girl appeared next to her own skeleton and looked up at Lenore sullenly. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," she told the little girl, who motioned down another path of the crawl space. "If you keep going that way, you'll see an exit that leads outside a hole in the side of the house, with a rose bush blocking it." Lenore nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, and with her items in tow, she went the way that was shown to her. After walking for a bit, she was met with a rose bush and a hole in the side of the house. Crawling on all fours, she went through. Noticing the door was left wide open, Lenore took the opportunity to shut it. Using something nearby, she blocked the door from being opened. Running up to her car, she noticed that the tires were slashed, along with the moving truck. Going over to Mr. White's car, she tried the handle, opening it up, and searching for the keys. Banging on the front door made her jump as she saw the keys in the tiny tray in the front gear shift. Pressing the button, Lenore started the car and backing up. Mr. White cursed as he lifted the engineer's hammer in his hands and began smashing through the door. A wet hand placed itself onto his shoulder and then another. Mr. White slowly turned and looked at the decayed face of his gardener, who screamed into his face before throwing him. As he hit the stairs, Mr. White looked up to where the gardener's daughter stood, her neck and limbs twisted in unnatural angles, letting out a pained wail. Eyes widening, the man crawled away on all fours until he was right in front of his own daughter. "Eris, sweetheart." Mr. White smiled until he saw her pick up the hammer they had dropped from his hands when the gardener threw him. Eris raised it high above her head before letting it slam down into his head. A sickening, wet crunch echoed in the air, followed by a thick, screeching spelt sound, red chunks flying against the floor and nearby wall. Lenore gripped the steering wheel tightly as she focused on the road. She would stop in the hotel to rest for the night and call the police in the morning. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Shadows and Secrets. I'm your host, Lenore Black. Today, I want to talk to you about my experiences while living in the Ashcroft estate and the mysterious realtor, Mr. White. For the first time, I will take live callers. Caller number 1, you're on the air. There was a silent pause, so she laughed it off. No need to be shy. Who are you and where are you from? There was a crackling on the other end. Hello, Miss Black. Lenore froze. It couldn't be. He was dead. She was sure of it. Who is this?
You know exactly who I am, Miss Black. I do hope you will visit soon.
They said plants grew faster if you exposed them to classical music, and he put that to the test, leaving a radio in his sealed greenhouse playing continuously since 1975. He didn't know the frequency had been bought by a death metal station, and when he opened the door, the plants had grown into something ungodly. Have We Met Before? By The Lego Man 2. And trigger warning, self-harm. Hello again, or is it just hello? Have we met this time around? There are too many people to remember them all, so forgive me if I forgot your name. I need your help. I don't know how I wound up in this situation, but I seem to have been Groundhog Day'd. I have seen the world end thousands of times, and I need someone to help me. It wasn't world-ending apocalypses initially. It started out with small things. I get hit by a car and die, so next time around I'd wait till the car went past, then cross the street. Just little things like that. After the first 100 or so times around, though, things started to get a little more extreme. The first such example was a man with a knife who charged me and stabbed me to death, so I called the police ahead of time. They made it, stopped him from attacking me, and hit me with a stray bullet when the knife man charged them. After that, I took a different route to the coffee shop. The first time I actually made it to the coffee shop, a gas line exploded when I arrived and killed me, and I assume everyone else there at the same time. After that, I decided to try and leave town, so I went to catch a train, which promptly derailed and took out everyone on the platform as it did so. The strange thing is, though, that I checked the news while I was on the platform, and the gas line didn't explode this time around. That got me thinking, if bad things were only happening to kill me, what if I stayed home and waited out? Well, the only time I tried that, I was the victim of a plane crash in my own living room. I decided my best course of action was to wander the city for the day and do my best to be aware of my surroundings, and wouldn't you know it, it got me further than anything I tried so far, but ultimately failed when we were hit with a chemical weapon strike. At that point, I came to the decision that I should stay away from crowds to minimize casualties. The problem was I didn't own a car, so my options were public transportation or walk, and public transportation hadn't treated me well today. I started walking first thing in the morning. By noon, I was on the city outskirts with lifestyle blocks lining the highway. I made sure to stay well away from any vehicles that I saw on the road. That, of course, didn't stop the bombs from killing me. I turned around after the bright flash and a couple seconds later, woke up back in my bed. The next few attempts I tried running, but for the first time, the exact cause of death repeated itself. That's when I realized that the only way to prevent an event was to be safely out of its reach. I spent a few attempts trying to find the most accessible bike I could to borrow. After a few attempts, I found that one of the bikes at the convenience store had been left unlocked. That time, I made it to the next town over. Turns out, they were quite earthquake-prone. It took a few attempts, but I eventually found a safe spot to weather the earthquake. The declaration of war came next. Several war leaders were assassinated all at once, and everyone blamed everyone else. And then the missiles began to fly. And surprise, surprise, the first nuke hit the town I was in. Interestingly enough, if I didn't go to that town, the war didn't happen. I figured that since I was far enough from the first nuke that I didn't die immediately, then it had to be a different cause of death. I had taken to keeping up with the news to try and avoid anything that seemed dangerous. I basically gave up when I saw that a virus had swept across more than half of the continental United States in a matter of hours, leaving very few survivors in its wake. The experts were saying 97% of the population was dead within 5 minutes of first symptoms, and believe me, it was not a comfortable 5 minutes. After that, I tried to break the loop myself a couple times, if you catch my drift. That evidently also didn't work. That's when I had an idea. Scuba gear should have enough oxygen for me to last at least the initial pass of the virus. And if the pattern holds, that meant that it wouldn't happen at all. I was right. I looked like an idiot in a stolen scuba mask, but I was right. That still didn't stop the meteor though, and that's where I've been stuck for the past few hundred days. 3:37 p.m., the world ends. And I don't know if there is any way, aside from breaking the time loop, to stop it. Which brings us to the reason I'm writing this now. I think I have figured out a way to break it. I've spent a few decades at this point studying mythology about time loops, and I think I know which one I'm in. Are you familiar with the concept of purgatory? Well, it's kinda like that, except I'm not dead yet, and it's contagious. It's a punishment, and once I have made amends and atoned for my sins, I believe I will be set free. It also turns out that, by sharing my knowledge, I have spread the reach of this curse. Thank you all for taking on a portion of my suffering and making penance for my sins. If you want my advice, don't dodge the car. It hurts a lot less than the feeling of your lungs liquefying in your chest. Goodbye for now. I'll see you on the next go-around. I woke to small hands grabbing my ankles and groggily pulled my toddler into bed with me, then fell back asleep. Hours later, fear paralyzed me as I awoke to the sound of my own child crying from the baby monitor, my arms still heavy with the weight of whatever I had dragged into my bed. I found an old family journal about the Black Plague. I should have kept it closed. By SocietysMenaceCC. I never expected to find anything of significance while clearing out my great-aunt Theodore's house in Yorkshire. The elderly woman had lived alone for decades in the sprawling Victorian mansion, and after her passing at the age of 94, the task of sorting through her belongings fell to me. Most of her possessions were exactly what you expected. Dusty furniture, outdated clothes, and boxes after boxes of faded photographs. But in the attic, buried beneath a stack of molding blankets, I found something extraordinary. A leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. The cover was unmarked save for a single name written in flowing script. Aldridge Blackwood, 1665. My hands trembled as I opened it. Alric Blackwood had been a distant ancestor, a physician who lived through the Great Plague of London. I'd heard stories about him growing up, but I never knew any personal accounts that survived. The pages were remarkably well preserved, though the ink had faded to a rusty brown in places. As I began to read, I realized with a growing unease that this was no ordinary physician's diary. 12th of May, 1665. Today I witnessed something that defies all medical knowledge I possess. The plague has begun to spread through London Street, as we all feared it would. But there is something different about this outbreak, something that fills me with a deep and gnawing dread. I was called to attend young Thomas Whitemore, son of the merchant on Bread Street. The boy presented with the typical symptoms: fever, chills, and a small swelling in his neck. But when I examined the bubble more closely, I observed movement beneath the skin, not the usual pulsing of infected tissue, but something deliberate, purposeful. When I lanced the swelling, what emerged was not merely pus and blood. I shall document this precisely, though my hands shake to write it. The infected matter seemed to wither of its own accord, and within it, I glimpsed what appeared to be minute, thread-like structures, twisting and coiling like tiny eels. Young Thomas expired within hours. His father begged me to examine the body, convinced some curse had befallen his son. I agreed, though I now wish I hadn't. The body's lymph nodes, when extracted, contained more of the strange fibers. Under my microscope, they appeared to be almost crystalline, with complex branches patterning unlike anything I encountered in my studies of the disease. I have preserved several samples. God forgive me, but I must understand what this is. 15th of May, 1665. 3 more cases today, all showing the same peculiar characteristics. The fibers appear in every sample I examine. They seem to grow more complex, more organized with each passing day. I began to sketch their patterns, though I fear my drawings do not do justice to their bizarre intricacy. My colleague, Dr. Edmund Halsey, believes I'm allowing fear and exhaustion to cloud my judgment. He claims I'm seeing patterns where none exist, that these are merely the typical signs of the bubonic plague. But he hasn't observed them under the microscope as I have. He hasn't seen them move. I must document something else, though I hesitate to commit it to paper. The infected seem to share a common behavior in their final hours. They speak of visions, not the usual fevered hallucinations, but specific, constant images. They describe vast networks of tunnels branching endlessly beneath the earth. They whisper about something moving through these passages, something ancient that has been waiting. I tell myself these are merely ravings of dying minds, yet each patient describes the same scenes, down to the smallest detail. How can this be? 20th of May, 1665. I've made a terrible discovery. The samples I preserved, they've changed. The fibers have grown more numerous, forming intricate patterns that seem almost like writing in a language I cannot read. When I examine them, I feel a curious sensation, as if something is attempting to communicate through these bizarre structures. More disturbing still are the rat. London has always been plagued with them, but their behavior has become increasingly erratic. They gather in large groups, moving with an unnatural coordination. Yesterday, I observed a group of them in my laboratory, clustered around the cabinet where I keep my samples. They seem to be listening for something. I've begun to experience strange dreams. I see the tunnels my patients describe, endless passages that seem to pulse with their own heartbeat. Sometimes I hear whispers in languages that have never been spoken by human tongues. I tell myself this is merely the result of exhaustion and stress. but deep down, I know better. 25th of May, 1665. The infection rate is growing exponentially, but that is not what truly terrifies me. It's the patterns. They're everywhere now. In the spread of the disease through the city, in the way the rats move through the streets, in the very arrangement of the bodies we collect each morning. Everything follows the same branching structures I first observed in those tissue samples. I started mapping these patterns, and what emerges is impossible to ignore. The disease itself isn't spreading randomly. It's creating something, building something, using us as its medium. Dr. Halsey visited again today. He seems troubled by my research, especially my maps and drawings. He suggested I take some time to rest, mentioned that many physicians have been driven to madness by horrors we witness. But his eyes lingered too long on my samples. I noticed his hands trembling as he spoke. After he left, I discovered several of my samples were missing. 1st of June, 1665. I can no longer sleep. The dreams have become too intense, too real. In them, I walk through those endless tunnels, following the branching patterns that have become so familiar. But now I understand what they are, a root system, spreading through the very foundation of our city. And at the center of it all, something waits. Something has been growing, feeding, preparing. The pattern of infection, when mapped across London, creates a perfect replica of the structures I've observed in my samples. We're not dealing with a mere disease. We're dealing with something that thinks, that plans, that has been waiting in Earth since long before humans walked upon it. I've discovered references in ancient texts to similar outbreaks throughout history. The Black Death wasn't the first manifestation of this entity. It has emerged again and again, each time growing more complex, more organized, learning from each attempt. Today I visited Whitmore's again. The entire family is now infected, but they're not dying, they're changing. The fibrous growths have spread throughout their bodies, visible beneath the skin like dark rivers. They speak in unison now, describing the same visions I see in my dreams. They told me it's almost ready, that soon it will be complete. I must do something, but who would believe me? How can I explain what we call the plague as merely the visible portion of something far larger, far older, far more terrifying than we could ever imagine? 3rd of June, 1665. Dr. Halsey came to my house tonight, wide-eyed and rambling. He had taken my samples to study them himself to prove me wrong. Instead, he found exactly what I had described, but he went further in his experiment than I had dared. He claimed to have decoded the patterns, to have understood the message they contain. What he told me cannot be true, must not be true. But it explains everything, the consistent visions, the coordinated behavior of the infested, the precision patterns of the disease's spread. We are not dealing with a plague at all. We're dealing with something that's been waiting beneath our feet for millennia, slowly building itself using human body as its raw material. The fibers we observed are not symptoms of the disease, they are its true form. A vast network that connects all the infested into a single growing organism. And now, after centuries of preparation, it's finally ready to. The entry ends abruptly here, the pen having skirted across the page in a jagged line. 4th of June, 1665. Write this in haste. They are coming for me. I can hear them in the streets below. Not just the rats now, but the infected themselves, moving with the same horrible coronation. Dr. Helson is with them. I saw him through my window, his skin rippling with those familiar patterns. I've hidden my research as best I can. This journal will be with my sister in Yorkshire, along with some instructions that it should be preserved but never read. Some knowledge is too dangerous. The patterns are complete. The network is fully formed. Whatever has been growing beneath London is ready to emerge, to transform from an invisible web into something far more terrible. I understand now why the infected didn't die, why they changed instead. They were never meant to die. They were meant to become part of it. And now, I hear them on the stairs. The rats came first, hundreds of them, their eyes gleaming with an intelligence that should not exist in such creatures. Behind them, I hear the shuffling steps of the infested. Whoever finds this journal, burn it. Burn it and forget everything you read. Some things should remain buried. Some knowledge should stay hidden. The patterns are everywhere now. Once you begin to see them, you can never stop. They're in the very fabric of our world, waiting to be activated, waiting to spread, waiting to... The writing ends here, replaced by a series of intricate, branching patterns drawn in what appears to be dried blood. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. I told myself it was just the ravings of a man driven mad by the horrors of the plague. But as I set it down, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on my wrist, arrested against the pages, was a small, dark mark. When I looked closer, I could see thin, thread-like lines begin to spread beneath my skin, forming familiar branching patterns. I spent the next 3 days convincing myself the mark on my wrist was nothing, a trick of the light. Perhaps an allergic reaction to the old leather binding. But on the 4th morning, I could no longer deny what I was seeing. The pattern had spread halfway up my forearm, dark lines branching beneath my skin like tiny roots. The medical training made it impossible to ignore the implications. The branching patterns follow my lymphatic system perfectly, tracing paths between my lymph nodes that I memorized in anatomy class. But there was something else, something that sent ice through my veins. The pattern wasn't just following my lymphatic system, it was extending it, creating new pathways that shouldn't exist. I returned to Theodora's house, desperate to find anything else that might explain what was happening to me. This time, I searched the attic methodically, checking every box, every corner. Behind a false panel on the wall, I found a metal strongbox. Inside were more documents. Letters, hospital records, and most importantly, a series of correspondence between my great-aunt and someone named Professor Helena Blackwood, dated 1973. 15th of September, 1943. Dear Theodora, I must thank you for sending me Aldrich's journal. As a last practicing physician in the Blackwood line, I've long since suspected our family connected to the Great Plague went deeper than historical record suggests. Your discovery confirms my worst fears. I spent the last 20 years studying unusual disease patterns across Europe, focusing particularly on the incidence that mirrors the 1665 outbreak. What I found is deeply troubling. The branching patterns Eldrick documented have appeared repeatedly throughout history, always in isolated incidents that were quickly covered up or dismissed as medical curiosities. Enclosed are my notes from a case in Prague, 1928. A young girl presented with what appeared to be severe lymphomic inflammation. Within days, similar cases appeared throughout her neighborhood. The attending physicians documented branching patterns identical to those of Eldrick's drawings. But here's what truly terrifies me. He also documented instances of simultaneous movement among the infected. 37 patients spread across 3 hospitals all turned their heads at exactly the same moment to look in the same direction, all blinking in perfect unison. The outbreak was contained only when the entire neighborhood was quarantined and dealt with. The official records listed as a tragic fire. That's not all. I found references to similar incidences dating back to ancient Rome. They called it Morbius radicus, the root disease. The symptoms are always the same. The branching patterns, the coordinated behavior, the whispered descriptions of vast underground networks. I believe what Elric encountered was an isolated incident. It was merely one emergence of something that has been with us throughout human history. Something that uses disease as a mechanism for, I hesitate to use the word, but I can think of no other that fits colonization. Your loving cousin, Helena. There were more letters, but what caught my eye was a folder of medical photographs paper clipped to the next page. They were from various time periods, starting with grainy images from the 1920s and progressing to clear, more recent shots. Each showed the same thing. Patterns with distinctive branch patterns visible beneath their skin. The most recent photos were from a small outbreak in northern England in 1981. The patterns were identical to what was now spreading up my arm. But it was the last item in the box that truly shook me. A modern medical report dated just 3 years ago from a laboratory in London. Confidential, project root analyst of tissue sample recovered from 1665. Preservation reference, Blackwood collection. DNA sequence has revealed anomalous structures within preserved lymph node tissue. Branching filaments appear to be composed of previously unknown organic material with several impossible characteristics. 1. The sample remains metabolically active despite 350 years plus of preservation. 2. Filaments demonstrate ability to spontaneously organize into complex patterns. 3. When placed in proximity, separate samples display synchronous behavior. 4. Electron microscope reveals structures resembling neural networks. 5. Sample emits low-frequency electromagnetic pulse at regular intervals. Note: after 72 hours of observation, samples show signs of renewed growth, all testing suspended by orders of department chair. Samples sealed in containment unit pending review. Update: containment unit compromised. Nature of compromise unknown. Samples missing. Investigation ongoing. Final note: project terminated. All records to be sealed. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely read the last page. An handwritten note from my great aunt Theodora. To whoever finds this, I'm the last of the Blackwood line to serve as guardian of these records. Our family has carried this burden since 1665, watching, waiting, documenting every recurrence. We thought we could contain it by keeping the knowledge limited to our bloodline. We were wrong. 3 years ago, everything changed. The pattern began appearing again, but different this time, more advanced. The laboratory breach was no accident. It's growing, evolving. The network is rebuilding itself using our modern understanding of genetics and neural networks to create something far more sophisticated than Eldrick encountered. If you're reading this, you likely already seen the signs. The marks will have started small, a branching pattern that follows your lymphatic system. Soon you'll begin to notice other changes, moments of lost time, dreams of tunnels and roots, the sensation of being connected to something vast and patient and hungry. There's so much more you need to know about the ancient texts Helena found, about what really happened in Prague, about the true purpose of the patterns, but most importantly, about how they can be stopped. I've hidden the information separately. You'll find it when you're ready, when the patterns have spread enough for you to understand what you're truly dealing with. Look for the box marked with the root pattern, but be careful. Others be looking for it too, others who are already part of the network. Theodora. I sat down the paper and rolled up my sleeve. The pattern now reached my shoulder, and as I watched, I swore I saw them pulse ever so slightly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. But something else had changed too. Where before the marks had been random, now they seemed to form a distinct shape, letters almost. And I could read them. I knew I should have been terrified, should have gone to the hospital, called someone, done something. But all I could think about was finding the other box, about learning the truth, about understanding what I was becoming. Because somewhere deep in my mind, in a place I hadn't even known existed until the patterns reached it, I could feel them, all of them. Everyone who had ever been touched by the root patterns, everyone who was part of the network. And they could feel me too. They were waiting for me to understand, to accept, to join. But first, I needed to find that box. Finding the second box was both easier and more disturbing than I anticipated. My body simply knew where to look. As I moved through Theodora's house, the pattern under my skin would pulse stronger or weaker, like some gruesome game of hot and cold. They led me to the cellar, to the section of the wall that looked identical to all the others, but I could feel it calling to me. Breaking through the plaster revealed a metal box, smaller than the first, marked with branching lines that perfectly matched the ones now covering most of my torso. Inside was a leather folder containing what appeared to be research notes, medical diagrams, and something that made my blood run cold. A series of brain tissue slides dated to 1928, labeled Prague specimens. But it was the modern-looking USB drive taped to the inside cover that caught my attention. Theodora had prepared for whoever would find this. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. The file was a video recording. Theodora's face appeared on screen, looking gaunt and tired. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 2 weeks before her death.
If you're watching this, then the patterns have already started spreading across your skin. Don't bother trying to remove them. Surgery, burning, even amputation. The Bloodwood medical records document every attempt treatment over centuries. The patterns simply regrow, follow the same path, always rebuild the network. What I'm about to share with you is the accumulation of our family research, combined with modern medical analysts. Hannah was close to understanding it, but she died before making the final connection. I spent my life completing her work. The patterns aren't a disease. They're a communication system, a physical network connecting human hosts to something that's been growing beneath our feet for millennia. Each outbreak throughout history was an attempt to redefine this network, to make it more sophisticated, more efficient. The Prague incident in 1928 was the first time it achieved simultaneous neural synchronicity across multiple hosts. The tissue sample in the box are all that remain of that attempt. Under a microscope, you'll see that the branching patterns don't just follow the lymphatic system. They interface directly with neural tissue, creating new pathways between hosts. But here's what Helena didn't know, what we only recently discovered through electronic microscope and DNA analysis. The patterns aren't adding something to our bodies. They're activating something that was already there, dormant in our genetic code. Every human carries these latent structures. The patterns just wake them up.
The video paused as Theodora had a coughing fit. When she continued, there was an urgency in her voice that hadn't been there.
You need to understand, this isn't an invasion, it's an activation. Every plague, every outbreak, every instance of patterns appearing was just another attempt to switch us on, to activate what's been sleeping in our DNA since before we were human. The Blackwood family were more susceptible than most. Something in our genetic makeup make us ideal hosts for the initial stage of activation. That's why Aldrich was among the first to document, where our family has been connected to every major outbreak. I'm running out of time, so I'll tell you what you need to know most urgently. The patterns you've been seeing on your skin, they're not spreading randomly. They're forming specific sequences, like a code being written across your nervous system. Soon you'll start to understand this code. You'll begin to see how it connects to everything else. The tunnels beneath the cities, the way the disease spread, even the growth patterns of plants. There are others like you out there. Once the pattern spreads far enough, you'll be able to sense them. Some have been part of the network for years, generations even. They learned to hide the marks, to blend in. They're watching, waiting for the network to grow large enough for... No, you're not ready for that. First, you need to see the rest of the Prague documents. They show what happened in later stages of activation. But more importantly, they show you what we discovered about the source, about what's been waiting all this time, growing beneath.
The video cut off abruptly. The next file was labeled Prague Stage 4 PDF. As I opened it, I noticed something odd. The patterns on my arm were moving, shifting to match the diagrams appearing on my screen. My body was learning, adapting, implementing the information in real time. The document began with a detailed medical report. Subject 23, Prague outbreak, Day 17, terminal stage observations. The branching patterns now cover 94% of the subject's neural tissue. Brain activity shows perfect synchronicity with all the other stage 4 subjects. Autonomous functions, heartbeat, breathing, occur in perfect unison across all connected hosts. New growth patterns observed in deeper brain tissue. Subjects report shared consciousness experience. Memory transfer between hosts confirmed through control testing. Most significant discovery: subjects no longer behave as individuals. They function as nodes in a larger neural network, each brain serving as a processing center for what appears to be a vastly larger consciousness. Critical observation: this network appears to extend beyond the human hosts. Soil samples from beneath Prague shows identical branching patterns extending at least 300 meters below ground. These underground structures pulse in sync with the hostess's neural activity. Update: subjects have begun modifications in their environment. Working in perfect coordination, they are constructing something in the hospital basement. The structure follows the same branching patterns observed in tissue samples. Purpose unknown. Final note: military containment ordered after subjects began converting organic material into new growth medium. Method of conversion unknown. Entire facility to be sealed in. The rest of the document was heavily redacted, but the images remained. They showed cross-sections of human brain tissues with the familiar branching patterns. But these were different from the ones on my skin, more complex, more organized, like circuit diagrams drawn in living tissue. The last page contained a single photo, a massive underground chamber beneath the Prague hospital. The walls were covered in branching patterns that glowed faintly in the dark. In the center was a partially constructed structure that resembled a human nervous system scaled up to architectural size. But what made me slam the laptop shut was the realization that I understood exactly what I was looking at. Not just understood, I could feel my body wanting to recreate it. The patterns under my skin were already starting to shift, to organize themselves in similar structures. Something warm trickled down my face. When I wiped it away, my hand came back red. Not blood, something darker. The tiny branching fibers visible within it. I could feel them trying to grow, to spread, to connect. The laptop screen flickered back to life on its own. A new document was opening. As I watched, text began appearing, written in the same branching patterns that covered my skin. You are ready to begin finding the others. The network must grow. The structure must be completed. Below my feet, I could feel vibrations in the earth, regular, rhythmic, like a vast heartbeat, or perhaps footsteps. I knew I should run, should burn the documents, destroy the evidence, try to stop the spread somehow. But instead, I found myself walking to the cellar door. Others were coming. I could feel them getting closer, their patterns pulsing in sync with mine. And deep beneath the earth, something ancient and patient stirred, ready to rise through its newly awakened network. The others arrived exactly as I knew they would, their footsteps echoing in perfect synchronization above me. I could feel their patterns resonating within mine, 5 distinct nodes in the growing network. As they descended the cellar stairs, I saw they appeared completely normal, wearing ordinary clothes, looking like anyone you might pass on the street. Only I can see the faint line beneath their skin, pulsing in rhythm with my own. "Welcome, brother," said a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Shin. "We've been waiting for another Blackwood to join us. Your family always produces the strongest connections." I found myself answering in words that weren't entirely my own. "The network requires a Blackwood to complete the next phase." "Yes," she smiled. "Just as it did in Prague, just as it will again." But something wasn't right. As they moved closer, I noticed inconsistencies in their patterns. The branching structures beneath their skin weren't quite synchronized, showing subtle variations that couldn't have been possible in a true connected network. My medical training kicked in, and I began to analyze what I was seeing with critical detachment. "You're not part of the network," I said suddenly. "Not really. Your patterns, they're artificial." Dr. Chen's smile faltered. "Clever. Just like Theodora. She figured it out too, you know. Why do you think she had to be eliminated?" The truth hit me like a physical blow. You killed her. You're not connected to the network. You're trying to control it. "For decades, we've been trying to understand this phenomenon," another member of the group explained. "We attempted to artificially recreate the patterns to tap into the network, but it never works properly without a true carrier, a Blackwood. Your family's genetic makeup is the key to interfacing with the deeper structure." The Prague incident wasn't a natural emergency, I realized. It was an experiment. You tried to force an activation. "An experiment that you're going to help us complete," Dr. Chen said. "Your connection to the network is genuine. With you, we can finally establish control over the entire system." They moved to grab me, but at that moment, something extraordinary happened. The patterns across my skin began to pulse with brilliant clarity. Information flooded my mind, not from them, but from something far older and vast. I finally understood what Eldrick had discovered, what Theodora had protected, and what Helena had died trying to prevent. The network wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to protect us. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," I said, backing away. "The patterns, the network, they're not a disease or a tool. They're an immune system, a defense mechanism echoed in our DNA millions of years ago, designed to activate when needed." "Defense against what?" Dr. Chen demanded. Deep beneath our feet, something shifted, the vibrations I felt earlier growing stronger. "Against them," I whispered. The cellar floor cracked. Through the fissures, we could see deep channels lined with fossilized patterns, ancient neural pathways that had laid dormant for millennia. But between these patterns were other structures, alien geometrics, invasive growth patterns that bore no relations to the terrestrial biology. "There's another network," I explained, the knowledge flowing through me from countless connected hosts across history. "One that's been trying to establish itself since before humans existed. Every few centuries, it makes another attempt to take root, to spread through Earth's biosphere. The patterns we carry are our planet's natural defense, a way to detect and fight the invasion at a cellular level." "That's impossible. One of them breathed.
The Black Death, the Prague incident, every major outbreak. They weren't random. They were response attempts to incursions. The network activates when it detects the other trying to emerge. Every plague was actually an immune response. The ground shook more violently. Through the widening cracks, we could see something moving in the depths. Something with its own branching patterns, but wrong. Twisted and malformed like a cancer of reality itself. "It's happening again," I said. "That's why the network is waking up. That's why it needs a Blackwood. We're not carriers of the disease. We're antibodies." Dr. Chen raised a gun. "This changes nothing. We'll find a way to control both networks. The power they represent." She never finished the sentence. The patterns under my skin flared, and suddenly I was connected not just to the network, but to every instance of its activation throughout history. I could feel Eldridge's presence, and Helena's, and Theodora's. All the Blackwoods who had served as nodes in the ancient defense system. Acting on instinct, guided by centuries of accumulated knowledge, I pressed my hands against the earth. The pattern flowed from my skin into the ground, spreading outwards in an exponentially growing web. When they met the alien structures, they encapsulated them, just as human antibodies surrounding hostile bacteria. The others tried to run, but their artificial patterns betrayed them. The network recognized them as compromised cells and responded accordingly. I watched in horror as their pseudo-patterns dissolved, taking their cellular structures with them. They collapsed in organic slurry, their bodies converting themselves into raw material for the network's growth. Over the next few hours, I felt the network expanding beneath London, seeking out and neutralizing pockets of alien pattern. Through my connection, I could sense similar responses activating worldwide as humanity's ancient defense system came fully online. 3 days later, the incursion was contained. The network began to go dormant again, but I knew it would never fully sleep. It needs active nodes to maintain its vigilance, watchers to monitor for signs of the next attempted invasion. That's why I'm telling you this account, not as a warning, but as a training manual for others who might find themselves becoming part of the network. If you notice branching patterns spreading across your skin, don't fight it. Don't try to control it. Understand that you're part of something ancient and necessary, an immune system that spans continents and centuries. The patterns aren't a disease, they're an activation, a call to arms in a war most of humanity never notices, a war we've been fighting since before we were human. I still serve as an active node. The patterns are rarely visible now. They only show themselves when needed. I'm monitoring the network, watching for signs of new incursions. Sometimes I dream of deep places, of alien geometrics trying to take root in our reality. But I also feel the presence of other watchers, other nodes in humanity's immune system, standing ready to respond. We are the Earth's antibodies, and we are always watching. File note: found paperclip to this account. To the next node who hears this, Dr. Chen's organization wasn't completely eliminated. They're still out there, still trying to artificially recreate the patterns. If you're hearing this, they've probably already noticed you. Be careful. Watch for people with almost perfect patterns. And remember, the network isn't good or evil. It simply is. Like any immune system, It exists to maintain balance, to protect the whole at the expense of compromised parts. The patterns are spreading again. A new incursion is beginning. If you're hearing this, you're probably already changing, becoming part of the defense. Welcome to the network, and good luck. We'll be watching for your signal.
Do we need his consent? Asked the woman. If both of your sons are minors and you want to transfer some of one's lifespan to the other, then we can do it with parental consent, the man replied. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. If you have a story you'd like me to narrate, whether true or fictional, you can send it my way 3 different ways. All the links are down below for you guys. I do hope you enjoyed these stories and maybe found some you missed when they originally came out. I did reuse the audio and pictures, but I redid the music and the text on screen. I wanted it to run a bit smoother for you guys. I also didn't put them in order of release, just in order that I felt kind of fit them best. Sorry that I gave you 2 compilations back to back, but I also did want to have 2025 True and Fictional back to back. Over a week ago, I actually fractured my ankle, so I'm actually in a boot cast right now, which makes it very difficult to move at all. The small stuff that you do every day, those 1 or 2 steps, become very tedious when you have to have crutches and make sure that you're not stepping on the broken foot. It makes getting out of bed even a pain in the butt. Even though my computer's right next to it, I still have to carefully get up, carefully move, make sure I'm never putting weight on the foot that is injured right now. All that to say, I did pick the stories that I really enjoyed narrating and really enjoyed the story of. Now, if you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And of course, I would love a comment. Comment VIP if you actually got this far. I mean, we're well over 2 hours in. If you're on the podcast or are able to, please leave a review and a comment. If you'd like to help this channel and podcast grow, please share it with anyone who might enjoy it. It helps quite a bit. If you are willing to help in a more financial way, like these lovely people on screen right now, I do have Patreon and memberships where you get early access and a few other things. But if you'd like to do more of a one-time thing, I do have Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Super Thanks. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and listening. It always has and always will mean the world to me. Also, Happy New Year. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.